What happens when the leader of a nuclear superpower decides to push the one button that Europe has feared most for decades? 72 hours ago, Vladimir Putin activated what can only be described as the energy equivalent of a nuclear weapon against European civilization. At exactly 3 p.m. Moscow time on Tuesday, Putin signed Decree 847-2025, permanently and irrevocably terminating all energy supply contracts with hostile entity assets. By 6:00 p.m., Gazprom had physically closed all gas valves leading to European territory. Europe has been plunged into what can only be described as a new dark age. I'm writing this from a historic cafe in central Vienna, and the scene around me tells the story more powerfully than any economic data ever could. People are wearing significantly heavier coats than normal because many buildings have minimized heating for energy conservation. Thermostats that once read 22 degree Celsius now display 16 degree Celsius. Families are sleeping in thick clothing, and the psychological atmosphere has shifted from confidence to survival mode virtually overnight. I've spent my career analyzing how great powers use strategic leverage to reshape global order, and what Putin has executed represents the most devastating non-military strike against a major power bloc in modern history. This isn't temporary disruption, it's systematic civilizational degradation designed to permanently reduce Europe's capacity to function as a global power. The technical implementation was swift and comprehensive. North Stream, Turkish Stream, and the Yamal pipeline, every route was completely severed within hours. Europe went from receiving approximately 400 million cubic meters of Russian gas daily to absolute zero. The infrastructure exists, the contracts existed, the economic relationships existed, but Putin eliminated them with a single decision that cannot be reversed through negotiation or compromise. The immediate economic collapse has exceeded even the most pessimistic scenarios. Within 24 hours, European natural gas prices increased tenfold. Energy markets collapsed. Stock exchanges entered free fall, and the euro lost 15% of its value against the dollar. Germany activated its National Energy Emergency Plan, a protocol designed for wartime conditions. BASF announced temporary closure of all German facilities, while Volkswagen suspended production at 3 main factories. The international responses reveal the scope of the crisis. France issued warnings about the most difficult winter since World War II and imposed a 15-degree limit in public buildings. Italy declared a state of energy warfare and authorized seizure of private fuels for national survival. The Netherlands is considering reopening coal mines that were closed a decade ago as environmental progress. These aren't energy policy adjustments, they're emergency measures for civilizational survival. Putin's strategic motivations operate on multiple levels that Western analysts consistently misunderstand. From the Kremlin's perspective, Europe has been using Russian gas to finance their economies while simultaneously providing military support against Russia in Ukraine. This represents the ultimate strategic asymmetry. Putin can completely paralyze European economies without firing a single shot, while Europe's entire response depends on military aid to a third party. The Asian alternative markets that Russia has constructed over the past 3 years can absorb all the gas that Europe previously consumed. This wasn't improvised desperation, it was systematic preparation for exactly this moment. Chinese energy infrastructure, Indian pipeline connections, and Central Asian distribution networks were built specifically to enable this strategic pivot away from European dependence. The China factor reveals the broader geopolitical coordination behind this move. Xi Jinping held a secret video conference coordination session on Sunday before Putin's decision. China immediately announced it would purchase all Russian gas that Europe rejected, creating a win-win scenario for both authoritarian powers. China gets cheap Russian energy while selling alternative manufactured products to desperate Europe at premium prices. Turkey's sudden rise to strategic importance demonstrates how quickly geopolitical leverage can shift. Erdogan now controls the only Russian pipeline still operational on European territory through Turkish Stream. Turkey has positioned itself as a neutral energy mediator, but demands massive political concessions, including termination of all European sanctions, support for Syrian military operations, and recognition of Northern Cyprus Turkish Republic. The social and humanitarian crisis emerging across Europe reveals the human cost of what amounts to energy warfare against civilian populations. European hospitals report a 400% increase in hypothermia cases. Elderly people are dying from cold in their own homes. Poland is distributing emergency blankets and stoves to families facing 25 degrees Celsius temperatures. 2 million French households cannot heat their homes to minimum survival temperatures. The social revolutionary movements emerging across Europe indicate political consequences that extend far beyond energy policy. Yellow vests have returned to Paris demanding NATO withdrawal, normalization with Russia, and an end to European energy suicide. Mass demonstrations in Berlin have forced Scholz to cancel public appearances. Italy faces indefinite general strikes until normal energy relations are restored. The civilizational implications encompass recognition that a continent unable to guarantee basic heating for its population cannot project global military, economic, or diplomatic power. European capacity to maintain NATO obligations becomes questionable when domestic populations face survival crises. Industrial production collapses when energy costs exceed profit margins. Financial stability erodes when energy security disappears. The strategic implications include permanent degradation of European influence in global affairs when basic infrastructure dependencies cannot be guaranteed. Nations facing existential energy crises cannot credibly threaten others with economic sanctions or military intervention. European leverage in international negotiations evaporates when survival depends on energy imports from strategic rivals. The economic implications encompass systematic deindustrialization as energy-intensive manufacturing becomes economically impossible. German chemical industries, French steel production, and Italian manufacturing cannot operate profitably with energy costs increased by factors of 10 or more. European economic competitiveness disappears permanently when energy foundations collapse. The technological implications include European inability to maintain advanced industrial processes requiring reliable energy supplies. Research and development capabilities deteriorate when universities and laboratories cannot afford operational energy costs. European technological leadership erodes when basic industrial infrastructure becomes unsustainable. The demographic implications encompass potential population displacement as European cities become uninhabitable during winter months without adequate heating. Migration patterns may reverse as European populations seek warmer climates or regions with reliable energy access. Urban civilization requires energy infrastructure that Putin has eliminated. The military implications include degradation of European defense capabilities when energy resources must be allocated to civilian survival rather than military operations. NATO commitments become impossible to maintain when member nations face domestic energy emergencies. European military-industrial production collapses when energy costs exceed sustainable levels. The alliance implications encompass potential fracturing of European unity as nations compete desperately for limited alternative energy supplies. Solidarity disappears when survival is at stake. European integration dissolves when member nations pursue independent strategies for energy security through bilateral arrangements with energy suppliers. The diplomatic implications include European loss of international credibility when basic governance capabilities fail due to energy dependencies. Nations unable to provide basic services to their populations cannot effectively negotiate with energy suppliers who maintain leverage through systematic dependencies created over decades. The financial implications encompass potential collapse of European banking systems as energy costs make economic activity unprofitable across multiple sectors simultaneously. Currency stability erodes when energy imports require massive foreign exchange expenditures. European financial markets lose credibility when energy security remains unresolved. The institutional implications include potential dissolution of European Union structures when member nations prioritize national survival over collective policies. Brussels loses relevance when energy crises require immediate bilateral solutions rather than bureaucratic coordination. European institutions designed for prosperity management cannot function during civilizational emergencies. The cultural implications encompass potential degradation of European civilization when basic heating, lighting, and industrial activity become luxuries rather than necessities. Cultural institutions require energy infrastructure that Putin has eliminated. European cultural leadership disappears when survival takes precedence over cultural production. The historical implications include recognition that Putin has achieved through energy warfare what military conquest could not accomplish: systematic reduction of European civilization to pre-industrial conditions. Medieval living conditions return not through military destruction, but through technological dependency elimination. The psychological implications encompass European recognition that decades of energy policy created vulnerabilities that strategic rivals could exploit for civilizational destruction. Confidence in European leadership evaporates when basic survival becomes uncertain. European populations lose faith in institutions unable to provide fundamental services. The cascade implications include potential inspiration for other energy suppliers to use similar strategies against dependent importers. Russia has demonstrated that energy dependencies can be weaponized for strategic advantage without military risk. Other nations may pursue similar strategies for achieving geopolitical objectives through energy leverage. Putin may have condemned millions of Europeans to freeze this winter, but he has also potentially condemned all of Europe to decades of economic decline and geopolitical irrelevance. A continent that cannot guarantee basic heating for its population cannot credibly claim global power status or international leadership. In the 21st century, whoever controls energy controls the fate of entire civilizations. Energy winter isn't just a metaphor, it's the new reality for a continent that gambled its prosperity on geopolitical stability and lost. Europe's return to the Dark Ages represents the price of strategic dependence in an era of great power competition where energy has become the ultimate weapon. The systemic transformation encompasses recognition that Putin has fundamentally altered the global balance of power through energy warfare that proves economic interdependence can be weaponized for strategic advantage. European assumptions about mutual dependency providing security have been revealed as dangerous illusions when one party controls essential resources. The civilizational regression implies Europe's return to pre-industrial living conditions demonstrates how quickly advanced societies can be reduced to survival mode when fundamental infrastructure dependencies are eliminated by strategic rivals. Modern civilization requires reliable energy flows that Putin has permanently disrupted. The geopolitical realignment encompasses recognition that Europe's loss of global power status creates opportunities for alternative power centers, including China, India, Turkey, and Russia, to fill leadership vacuums in international institutions, economic arrangements, and diplomatic initiatives previously dominated by European influence. The strategic dependency implications include European recognition that energy security represents national security in ways that military spending cannot address. Nations dependent on external energy supplies remain vulnerable to strategic coercion regardless of military capabilities or alliance memberships. The economic warfare implications encompass Putin's demonstration that non-military strategies can achieve strategic objectives, traditionally requiring military conquest. Energy cutoffs prove more effective than conventional warfare for achieving political goals, while avoiding military risks associated with direct confrontation. The alliance fracturing implications include potential dissolution of NATO when member nations cannot maintain military capabilities during domestic energy emergencies. Collective defense becomes impossible when individual nations face survival crises requiring resource allocation to civilian needs rather than military obligations. The technological regression implications encompass European inability to maintain advanced industrial processes, research capabilities, and innovation systems without reliable energy infrastructure. Technological leadership requires energy security that Putin has eliminated through systematic supply disruption. The institutional collapse implications encompass breakdown of European Union structures when member nations prioritize national survival over collective policies. Brussels bureaucracy becomes irrelevant when energy crises require immediate bilateral solutions rather than multilateral coordination processes. The psychological collapse implications encompass European recognition that decades of prosperity depended on strategic vulnerabilities that rivals could exploit for civilizational destruction. Confidence in European institutions evaporates when basic survival becomes uncertain due to external dependency. The demonstration effect implications include encouragement for other regional powers to challenge Western influence through strategic resource control rather than military confrontation. Putin has proven that energy leverage provides more effective tools for achieving geopolitical objectives than conventional military strategies. Putin's energy weapon has achieved what decades of military threats could not accomplish: systematic reduction of European civilization to medieval conditions through technological dependency elimination. Europe's global power status has been permanently eliminated through strategic vulnerabilities that Putin exploited with devastating effectiveness.